In 2004, we discovered that imaging sensors have unique fingerprints. You can think of an imaging sensor as millions of pixel elements or pixels that register light, and they are not made all the same. They should be ideally the same, but they are not really. They are slightly off in how they react to light. So even if you take a picture of something that's completely uniform, like blue sky, it will not be just a constant signal, but there will be small random variations, and most of them will be truly random. Like if you repeat that shot again, they will be different, but there will be a small weak signal that's persistent, the same from image to image, and that's called the camera sensor fingerprint. And so I was lucky to be in the beginning of something big, so the right place, right time, kind of. So, and plus it was very exciting because there are many applications of hiding information in images. You can use it for copyright protection, you can use it for integrity verification to figure out that certain portion of the image has been tampered with. Yes, you can insert a mark, which is a bit stream, let's say 64 bits, into an image in a robust way, so that if you compress the image using JPEG, or if you resize the image, if you recolor the image or adjust the brightness, contrast, it's still readable, those 64 bits, and they identify you as the creator or copyright owner. It's a technology that can be easily misused, just like cryptography, and there are examples of basically criminals or terrorists using steganography.
This week on American Real, we bring you the amazing story of Jessica Fridrich. Jessica is a problem solver. She is a mathematics professor at Binghamton University, and at an early age she came up with a method to speed solve the Rubik's Cube in 20 seconds or less. In addition, Jessica is an amazing photographer. She turns that photography into artwork, and we'll show you some of those images where she goes on the border of Utah and Arizona up into the mountains, and it looks like she's on Mars. So if you like this episode, please share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to our Instagram and YouTube channel, and also check out AmericanReal.tv and learn how to master your life story. And now, without further ado, I bring to you Jessica Fridrich. Welcome to American Real. This is Roger Brooks, and today my very special guest is Jessica Fridrich, a professor at Binghamton University, where you specialize in digital camera forensics and steganography, the art of science of covert communication in digital images. In addition, you are a photographer and an artist, creating incredible pieces that are garnering international attention. And in your early years, you developed the CFOP method for speed solving the Rubik's Cube. Jessica, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here today. And wow, I've done a lot of research, and everything you do is really around problem solving. When I think about your work at the university, when I think about your artistry, and going back to your days of solving the Rubik's Cube everything's around problem solving. Do I have that right?
Yes, you did.
And so, if you can, it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about your upbringing in the Czech Republic. What was it like growing up there in that country? It's a fascinating country. I'd love to know more about it.
Well, in many ways it was difficult, and in many ways it was also easy because many options were taken away from us. I was interested in astronomy as a child. I was 10, and you couldn't just go to a store and buy a telescope. So we had to build one with my father. So we would go to the optician store and buy a lens, and then we would go to the carpet store, wondering why, because they had those paper tubes that
Right.
we would buy 2 of them, insert them into each other, then buy a watchman's loop, and put together a telescope, and I could explore the light polluted skies of my city where I was born in. So it was, you can say it's a bad thing that we couldn't buy the telescope, but at the same time it was actually fun to put things together. And this pretty much mirrored the experience in my childhood. The not enough access to information and not being able to check out a book from the library. But that's what made it also, in some sense, exciting.
Yeah, so this is fascinating. So your father must have had some level of experience building a telescope, I would assume. I mean, how did he learn to do that?
Well, he was a man of many professions. He was teaching actually something like electrical engineering at a high school level, but he was also certified car mechanic, and he was certified technician of airplanes. I don't know how to translate that. So he could fix just about anything in the household, an iron, a TV. We had a big box with electronic parts, and he would just reach in and replace whatever was burnt, and that was it. We wouldn't call somebody to fix the TV. He would just fix it himself. So he could do a lot of things. He could work on a lathe and create those little circles from silicon that he would insert into the tube of the telescope and make it actually look good, make it work well. So he was an inspiration. Yeah.
I bet. And do you recall when you would look at space through this telescope that you both made? Was the focus okay? I mean, were you able to actually, see the stars?
You could see a lot actually. We discovered that there are sunspots on the sun, and some are black and some are white at the rim of the sun circle of the sun's disk, and I was doing it also with a friend of mine from the neighborhood, and we were so excited about it. We thought we discovered something that no one knew about, that there are white spots on the sun instead of black spots. So we would end up calling a solar observatory in Czech Republic, and the director of the observatory actually told us that those are special fields whose temperature is higher, than the rest of the sun's surface, and this is why they appear to be brighter and lighter and white. So we were kind of down that we didn't discover anything new, but it was exciting.
I bet.
We couldn't read it in a book, but we discovered it ourselves, and
Sure.
That's what made it really exciting. Yeah.
That's great. And how old were you at this time?
I was like between maybe 12 and 13 maybe
Okay.
years old, something like that. Yeah.
Very neat. And I understand your father was also an artist, and actually there's several generations of artists in the Fridrich family, correct?
Yes. My great-grandfather was a photographer, professional photographer. He was doing portraits, and it was in a small town of Holešov in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And my father was an amateur painter. He couldn't make a living this way because his political profile wasn't up to that level. Basically, people who had some sort of a political problem, like disapproving of the 1968 what happened in 1968 in Czech Republic, in Czechoslovakia, I should say, would have problems later on. So he could not be a professional painter, but he would still manage to sell his paintings, mostly landscapes and still lifes, to friends, family, and then as the word spread, to other people, I mean, our whole living room was filled with his paintings. There was not a square inch sometimes on the walls that was not covered by some sort of an old painting. He did also abstract painting. We had pictures everywhere, behind furniture, wherever there was some space, there were pictures stacked up everywhere. And some of them I brought with me to America, and we have them in our house now.
Nice. So this was a big part of your life, the art.
Yes.
The astronomy.
Yes.
The exploring.
Yes.
And then you go to college in Prague, is that right?
Yes, I went to college in Prague. I was interested in both art and technical fields. I was interested, astronomy brought me to math. I discovered how powerful it was, what kind of a tool, wonderful tool mathematics is, and what you can do with it. So, when I was in the 5th grade, everybody thought that I would be pursuing fine arts because I was drawing everywhere. Disney characters, basically. We had stickers in the bathroom and on the walls, and I would be drawing those. Yeah, Mickey Mouse
sure.
and Donald Duck and these. But then, as I grew older, I just fell in love with the math as well, and I chose to pursue a career in engineering and applied math in Prague.
How old were you when you really started to take to math? As far as, was there ever an aha moment where you said, wow, I want to do this?
Actually, yes. It was in about 6th grade, and it was connected to my interest in astronomy. When I needed to compute certain things, like what kind of stars I can see with the telescope, and there was a little formula that involved logarithm. And of course, we didn't have anything like that at school in 6th grade yet. This is more like a high school material. So I had to learn ahead. And this learning ahead math stayed with me. And I pretty much mastered all high school math, including calculus and differential calculus in 8th grade. So the whole high school, I didn't learn anything in math.
And were you doing that on your own, or was someone?
Yeah, on my own, yeah.
Really?
Fortunately, there were books that described this, so I would basically study from those books.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And tell us about Prague. What kind of city is it like? What do you remember most? What do you miss?
Well, it's a beautiful city, first of all. You have to experience it rather than see the pictures. You have to kind of feel the buzz, hear the noise, smell, to really see what it's about, to see the old buildings, to see the history. Just take a walk through Charles Bridge. That's really nice. I didn't have much time to explore Prague when I was there because our dorms were like on a hill that was kind of separated from the center, and so was the school where I was going. It was actually in downtown. Some of the classes were in downtown, so we would enjoy good beer. Actually, there was this famous brewery right across the place where we had portion of our classes. So we would always, after doing hard math, we would end up at getting one there.
That's great. And what do you miss?
What do I miss about Prague?
Yeah, and
or Czech Republic
in general.
Well, I miss my family, basically. My mom is there, my sister is there. I don't really miss Czech Republic that much, I have to say.
More the people.
Yeah, I miss the people, yes. I'm more of a person of nature I like nature, and this country, I mean, U.S., is just a fantastic place to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many things, and we'll definitely talk about that as we get into your photography and artwork. But I'd love to understand because I remember when I first got the Rubik's Cube, I'd love to understand how that became an interest of yours, and then really what I see as an obsession to not only solve it, but to come up with a method that you could teach other people to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's a big story in my life. It's coming wherever I go. The cube goes with me, whatever I do. I was in high school, junior in high school, when I read about the cube, and I mean, at that point, it was already on sale everywhere in the world except for the countries in the socialistic bloc. Funny, but that's how the economy worked, and it plays into what I said. You just couldn't get much stuff, including toilet paper. So the first time I saw the cube, it was like a mathematical seminar for kids from high school, where they would teach us some advanced concepts. And one person from Prague brought the cube to that seminar, and of course, you know, it created a big buzz. Everybody wanted to play with it, and I had it for about 15 minutes. I could solve just one side, and I knew I was hooked. So the next phase was how to get the cube. You know, you couldn't just go to a store. It was not awesome. In Japan, yes. In Germany, yes. In US, yes. But not in Hungary, yes, but not in Czech Republic. So I waited for a summer vacation when my family went to Hungary, and we bought a cube there. And even there, it wasn't easy to buy, actually.
Really?
Yes, it wasn't easy to buy. We bought it from somebody in the street who slipped it to us in a brown bag, looking around like this. It was still a black market of some sort. So this is how I got my first cube, and I started practicing, developing algorithms. I had a system before I had the cube. Unfortunately, I got my hands on a system from a Russian magazine, Quant.
Okay.
And I was basically drawing little pictures, how the stickers would move, where the cubes would go, like on a piece of paper. And this is how I would develop my first algorithms without the cube, just drawing pictures of the cube. So I would start with that system and morph it into what eventually became the CFOP, the Fridrich method.
And talk a little bit about that if you can, because I know there's different stages of that, right? So
yes.
What would be an example of how do you start?
You start by putting together the first face, and you put the four edges, basically, like you form a cross. And then you put the corners with the corresponding cubies from the second layer. You do it by layers, essentially. So then you do 2, 2, 2, and 2, and this will give you 2 layers, if you can imagine it. And after that, you flip the cube upside down so that you have the unsolved layer on the top. And first you flip the edges and the corners at the same time using one algorithm, so that the last face has the colors, usually yellow, if you have white against yellow. And then in the second stage, you just permute. You change their location without twisting the corners or flipping the edges, basically. It's called permutation. So the first phase of the second layer, of the last layer, is called orientation, O, and then permutation, P. This is the OP from the CFOP.
Okay.
CFOP means center, first 2 layers, orientation and permutation.
So then where does the speed come in? If someone gives you a cube right now, what are you looking for? What's the first thing you're...
Well, the first thing you try to figure out those first 4 edges. So you try to figure out a sequence that would put those 4 edges in place.
Okay.
And you don't have enough time, because it's like 15-second inspection. and then you have to start solving. And
I see.
and it's difficult to figure out more because as you are putting those 4 edges, everything changes and you don't know where the rest of the cubies are. So that's the first thing you look for.
I see. And so then what happens? So then once you acquire the cube, now you develop this method, and then you started doing entering different contests for this?
Well, I would attend some local contests, in the city where I was, where I lived. I would just win them with a huge margin. So at that point, I realized that I might have a shot at the nationals. So I applied for the nationals, and I won the nationals.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So this is part of your story. I mean, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And what was the what was your record as far as what was the fastest time to solve?
Well, I won the nationals in 1982 for 23:55.
Wow.
So that was a good time in 1982.
Sure.
And
But since then,
yes,
people have actually figured out a way to do it even quicker, right?
yes. There was a buzz, and I went actually to the first World Championship. It was by invitation only. Basically, the winners of the nationals were invited to Budapest in was it May or June 1982, and this is where we would compete. And the competition was done in a strange way because they gave us their own cubes that were new, unbroken, not broken in, so they were kind of like
Stiff.
grinding and stiff. Also, they had different coloring than that some contestants might have been used to. I was lucky it was my coloring, so I was fine, but I noticed that some people were incredibly fast with their own cubes, like in the backstage, and then basically burned out during the competition because the cubes were different and also very stiff. So I ended up at the 10th place. I didn't do well. My time was 29 seconds. You can tell that it wasn't a very good time, even in 1982. And so that was the first World Championship, and we had to wait 21 years for the next championship.
For the world?
For the World Championship, yes. That was in 2003 in Toronto.
And did you participate?
I participated in this one. I ended up second.
Really? In the
Yes,
world?
in the world.
And what was your time then?
It went by average instead of the best
Okay.
time. I don't remember what the average was. But the person on the first place, his name is Dan Knights. He was my cube student because I tutored him how to do the cube better and
And he beat
faster.
you.
He visited me, like
That's great.
a couple times, and I would explain, I saw that he was very talented, so I was helping him to grow. So he was the first and I was the second. The
Wow.
teacher was the second, the student was the first.
Were you proud of him?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, I bet. That's great. Well, it's a wonderful story. I mean, that's an incredible undertaking and second in the world. It's amazing. So since then, has there been? Have you taken some time off of the cube? I know you're so busy with other things, or do you still?
Well, since then, there is the World Championship is every 2 years.
Okay.
So there was one in 2005, 7, and so on. Something happened, and that's the internet happened, and people started sharing tips and how to improve, how to get better. And when you have this distributed way of developing something, the whole globe is basically developing a system or improving the system. And something strange happened. People got so fast that it's just mind-boggling. The world record today is 4.8 seconds or something around that time, 4.74. I'm not exactly sure. It is possible. It's online. You can see it. The world record holder, his name is Felix Zemdex, and he is from Australia. And he's a super talented kid. He has been on the top for many, many years. And he holds world records not just in the 3x3 cube, but also the larger cubes. It's what changed is the style of twisting. The cubes are also different. There are many versions specifically designed for speed cubing that are just easier to turn and kind of more forgiving.
I see.
But it's mostly the skill of the people who have incredibly gifted hands. They can do 10 moves in a second. They move 10 faces in a second, basically. They don't have any gaps in between the faces. No thinking. If you think for a second,
Done.
You're done, because, I mean, that's 1/5 of what it's supposed to be, right? If you do it in 5 seconds.
Right.
So it's incredible. To me, doing the cube in 5 seconds or faster than 5 seconds is just unbelievable. Something I would have never dreamt about. It's beyond the wildest dreams what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would think that you'd be proud to be part of that movement from the early days, right? Developing this method and now seeing that it's done in less than 5 seconds.
I mean, it's a miracle. For most people, solving it in 17 seconds or
Sure.
8 seconds is about the same, but it's an immense difference. It's like the difference between Usain Bolt and your best guy in high school.
Right.
Yeah.
I would love to move on to talk about your incredibly fascinating field of steganography. And so what I've read is, this digital watermarking forensics, and from what I gather, it's basically hiding data within imagery. Do I have that right?
Yes, exactly.
So I know it's a big subject to talk about, but I'd love to dive right into it. And
Yes.
First off, how did you get involved with this to begin with? Where did it start?
Well, it started after I got my PhD. I started doing image encryption using chaotic maps. And from encryption, I was working with Air Force Research Lab in upstate New York. And at one point, I remember the chief technical officer there mentioned, could you somehow not just encrypt the image, but make it look like it's some other image? Can you encrypt the image and make it look like some other image so that no one can tell it's encrypted? Because when you encrypt something, it becomes obvious that you encrypted it because it's garbled. It doesn't look like anything. You cannot read it, right?
I see.
So can you encrypt, but at the same time make it look like something else? Mm-hmm. And this is when I realized that, well, this is steganography. So this is how it all began, by asking that question by someone from the Air Force Lab.
I see. So then what happens? How do you get into what you're doing today?
Well, the field was relatively young in 1995 when I started, 1996. So there were only a handful of papers that I had to read to get into the field. And so I was lucky to be in the beginning of something big. So the right place, right time, kind of. Mm-hmm. So, and plus it was very exciting because there are many applications of hiding information in images. You can use it for copyright protection. You can use it for integrity verification to figure out that certain portion of the image has been tampered with. You can just check for that watermark inside the image and its integrity to know what happened. What's also exciting is how to tell that something is hidden in an image. The image is somehow modified, the pixels are somehow changed, the values are slightly off than what they should be, and can you tell, and with what certainty, that something is hidden in the image? So it's the other side of the fence. You always have to do both. Just like you cannot do cryptography and cryptanalysis, one of them you have to do both at the same time. You have to do steganography and steganalysis. So we started developing techniques, publishing. I started getting grants from government, and I was working at Binghamton University as a researcher until 2005 when I became a professor.
Wow. So when you say, for example, the copyright, can you give us an example of that?
Yes, you can insert a mark, which is a bit stream, let's say 64 bits,
Okay.
into an image in a robust way, so that if you compress the image using JPEG, or if you resize the image, if you recolor the image or adjust the brightness, contrast, it's still readable, those 64 bits, and they identify you as the creator or copyright owner.
I see. Okay. So then how, what are some examples of people that might be using, embedding messages, images in here, in these digital pictures for purposes, that may, whether it's, a terrorist group. I mean, are things like this happening today where?
Yes, yes. It's a technology that can be easily misused, just like cryptography. And there are examples of basically criminals or terrorists using steganography. So this is why the work on detecting steganography is extremely important, and this is what I mostly do these days.
I see.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to understand is there a software that detects that an image may have been, compromised in some way? Or is it more you're looking at a specific image and then there's a certain technique to decode that?
There are some techniques on the internet you can download that do this. They are not particularly good. We developed the science of this, but we don't develop the software per se. And I can imagine that some other government contractors or government agencies are doing what you just said.
Okay. To be able to do it in mass?
To be able to do it in real life, yeah. But they probably use our techniques for this purpose.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And can you tell us what's happening on a day-to-day basis over at the university? Are you trying to advance what you're doing continuously? I mean, as cameras change, as technology changes, I would assume that you have to keep up with those technologies, right? Because
yes.
The person on the other side is trying to figure out a way to manipulate that.
This is especially true for digital forensics. In 2004, we discovered that imaging sensors have unique fingerprints. You can think of an imaging sensor as millions of pixel elements or pixels that register light, and they are not made all the same. They should be ideally the same, but they are not really. They are slightly off in how they react to light. So even if you take a picture of something that's completely uniform, like blue sky, it will not be just a constant signal, but there will be small random variations, and most of them will be truly random. Like if you repeat that shot again, it will be different. But there will be a small, weak signal that's persistent, the same from image to image. And that's called the camera sensor fingerprint. And we discovered that this can be reliably detected, and you can use it to prove that a given image came from a specific device, from a specific camera, be it a phone or iPad or a digital camera or a video camera. It's called sensor fingerprint. You can also check for its integrity within the image to see if any portion has been removed or replaced, because the fingerprint will be different in that part. So we developed this technology in between 2004 and 2010, and it's being used by law enforcement. We worked with a company based in Griffith Industrial Park in Rome, New York, and they developed software based on our techniques that is being used by law enforcement. The main application here is to prosecute people who commit crimes by taking pictures.
Okay.
And those could be movie pirates or child pornographers, basically.
Okay. So wow, so that's really incredible work. So law enforcement is taking your techniques that has been refined by this entity in Rome, New York.
Implemented, yeah.
Right, it was implemented that, and it's actually in use today.
Yes. It's also in a movie.
Really? What is that?
It's a movie Beyond a Reasonable Doubt.
Okay.
It came out in 2010 or something around that time. It's by Peter Hyams.
Yes.
And it's starring Michael Douglas. And I recommend that you rent it on Netflix and watch yourself.
Great.
You will see our technique being used to catch Michael Douglas forging evidence and getting him behind bars.
That's good. Well, we'll definitely have to watch that
They
movie.
even mention our names.
Really?
Yes, they even mention 3 of our names.
That's great.
My name, the name of my postdoctoral assistant, and my graduate student. And they specifically say Binghamton University. Yeah,
That's
in
fantastic.
that
Now, did you
movie.
know that was happening at the time?
Oh
Did they
yes,
alert-
we were working with the director.
Oh, great. So
He-
they wanted to make sure it was
He
accurate.
asked about he asked about some visuals.
Okay.
He even sent me the script to look at the script, and I looked at the script, and there were a couple of things that just didn't make sense to me from the research point of view. So I sat down and rewrote the script,
That's great.
and I sent it back. And then I had a phone call from him. Then when he said, "I'm Peter Hyams. I'm the movie director. I've been doing it for 35 years. No one ever rewrote my script."
Well, you did. That's
I
great.
did.
That's great.
No, he was cool about it.
And I'm sure he wanted
He
to
asked
sure
about
it
what
was-
should be changed and how.
Okay.
He was paying attention, so that it's correctly portrayed in the movie and so on.
Great. Well, this is fun. Now we'll definitely watch that movie.
Yeah, you should.
And it'll be part of your story. That's
Yeah.
incredible. For people that don't know about like me, I knew nothing about this field, that it even existed. And it sounds like in many ways you're helping law enforcement.
Yes.
So my question is, what's next? Do you see digital photography staying fairly constant for a while? Or do you think there's new technology going beyond what we see today on our phones and in our cameras?
Oh, the technology is changing, and it will be very different in 10 years, I'm very sure.
What do you see?
Well, there's a couple of buzzwords I'm going to say. One of them is computational imaging, computational photography.
Okay.
Another one is different types of imaging sensors, larger sensors. But mostly the computational imaging. Computational imaging is when you acquire, you somehow register the light in many different ways to reconstruct the image later on. Have you heard about a light draw camera?
Mm-hmm.
The one that shoot first, focus later?
Yes.
So that's kind of an example of computational imaging.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't understand. So how does that work? How could it focus later?
What you register the wavefront itself. You don't register just the image that's rendered into focal plane. So you can kind of think of it as registering many different focus, many different images in different focal planes, and then reconstructing the image from those.
To bring them into focus.
Yeah, it's a trade-off between spatial resolution of the image, between the number of megapixels and the ability to do this.
How do you see that changing the devices that the common person uses?
This is just one example of many. Most cameras today have the HDR mode,
Mm-hmm.
the high dynamic range imaging, when the camera just takes several pictures with different exposures and then blends them together using sophisticated algorithms to give you a nice looking or better looking image. That's almost standard in just about any camera or phone. They have it, right? That's another example of computational photography. You can imagine also there have been designs when you have a camera with several different lenses and you take at the same time pictures from, first of all, different parallax from different positions, so you can capture three-dimensionality in there. You can have each one of those lenses focus slightly differently. You could even have different focal lengths and then take all this data that you acquired and use number crunching algorithms to form the final image. So there are many different ideas that you can do. What you can do with acquiring just a lot of data and then processing it to form the final image.
Right. So as you're talking, I'm thinking about a cell phone with several lenses. Is that what you're saying? There could be
Yes.
maybe 3, 4, 5 lenses
Yep.
on your cell phone.
Or more, yeah.
Wow.
Yep. There are cameras with this design already. They have like 8 or 9 of them. They are kind of positioned randomly and different. It looks weird because it's so random.
Sure. Do those advancements in technology change your study, your focus?
Of course. Like for example, the forensic techniques we develop for hardware, for the sensors, they need to change and need to be developed and they need to be updated as the technology is progressing. I'm always telling people that unlike human fingerprints, we don't evolve as species fast. So if you develop a technique for human fingerprinting and getting the fingerprints and matching them, it's going to work in the next 50 or 100 years, right? But not with cameras. It needs continuous research.
Because it's changing so fast.
Yes.
Incredible. Who would you say is benefiting from the secret communication that's embedded in these images?
Well, depends if the secret, you mean when somebody hides a message in an image?
Right. I mean, can an advertiser do that? So I'm just trying to think of all the different ways people may utilize that technique.
Well, you could resort to something like this if you are for example, a journalist in a hostile country and you cannot communicate with encryption. Anything encrypted just doesn't pass through.
Right.
Their censorship, basically. So then steganography is way to go, because you take a picture of something that they think the censors know, they know, but something else is hidden inside. Yeah.
So Jessica, can you tell us, some real life examples of how all of this hard work that you've put in for all these years has helped people today, or over the years? What are some examples?
Well, I don't know exactly all the details how it's being used and by whom. That's probably classified, but I do know that law enforcement has a program available that they use to prosecute child pornographers by proving that the images that they found on their computers actually came from their cameras in their possession rather than just downloading from the internet. So this is the key element that we can provide. Also by showing that the same sensor fingerprint resides in 2 different videos, you can make a link about the 2 entities posting the videos must know each other. So you can get an idea how this could be used for intelligence gathering, for example.
Okay.
So there is now a whole department in the law enforcement that is dedicated to this.
And I'm sure they're taking down rings of people, if you will, based on all this, right?
Oh yes. I have a postdoctoral assistant who has numerously testified in court as an expert witness, who did analysis of images that were brought to Binghamton on an encrypted CD. And he did the analysis why the agents, the special agents, were still there. So we also do this. Besides law enforcement, we also provide these services.
I see. It's fascinating, and it's good work. It's really, really good work. So let's talk about your artistry.
Okay.
The fun stuff. I had a chance to view some of your new images before we started, and I can't put into words that it just doesn't look like planet Earth. It feels like I'm looking at something from Mars or somewhere. You must be proud, and I'd like to talk about how this all came to be. When did you get interested in this type of photography that that we see in your show Elusive, and I know you have a new show that'll be coming up soon.
Well, I would say that I always liked hiking. and I started taking pictures while hiking, and I ended up hiking to take pictures. The turning point was probably the trip to Paria Wilderness in 2012 that I took with my student. We had a conference in San Francisco, and I knew about this remote place on the border between Arizona and Utah that I always wanted to visit, but I was kind of a little scared to go there alone, so I asked him to accompany me, and he agreed. And in May 2012, we went there, we rented a Wrangler, and we did something wild, and my life has been forever changed. I just wanted to portray the story of that place, not just by taking snapshots, but by taking pictures that would be a single image storyboards that would somehow bring this beauty back to people's homes and back to us.
And talk about this place. It looks very remote. So where exactly is it? It's on the border, you said, of Utah and Arizona?
Yes, it's between two towns. One is Page, Arizona. It also has that famous Antelope Canyon, if you heard about that. Yes. One, and then Kanab, Utah, which is close to Zion. And it's a region in between. It's a plateau, about 7,000 is the highest place, 7,000 feet. It's north of the Grand Canyon and kind of west of Grand Canyon. The Colorado River kind of meanders this way. Well, not really meanders, but turns. Mm-hmm. And the Paria Plateau is known also as Vermilion Cliffs National Monument. It's also part of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument.
Okay. And can anyone go there, or is it a place you need a permit?
Some places you need a permit to go to. They are called Coyote Buttes South and Coyote Buttes North. That's hosting the famous formation, the Wave. But some places like the White Bucket and the rest basically is free of permit. You can go there freely without any restrictions.
Interesting.
And some of those permits are really hard to get, like for the Coyote Buttes North. Those are super hard to get.
And what does it take? I mean, is it just time, or
there's a lottery for each month. Mm-hmm. There's 10 online permits for 4 months ahead of your hike that you apply online, and they hold the lottery in a computer fashion, and they pick 10 people out of 1,500. It's this many. Or you can get 10 permits, so there will be total 20 for each day, the day before the hike. So the day before the hike, you go to Kanab Visiting Center, and they hold the lottery, the walk-in lottery. And there could be anywhere between, up to 200 people for 10 permits. So your chances are pretty small, but probably larger than the online lottery.
And have you done that?
Yes, I won the online lottery many times, and I also won the walk-in many times. Wow. I've been to the Wave 26 times.
In how many years?
In about 6 years, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so now tell us, when you get there, you're way up in the mountains. Do you backpack? Are you sleeping there?
You're not allowed to. The permit is not for overnight, so you're technically not allowed to spend the night there.
I see.
But what I think is okay to do is to walk in early in the morning. That's for sure okay. Or just staying slightly past midnight if you need to shoot at night. So that's what I sometimes do. Usually I go for the sunrise and I stay until sunset, so it's a super long day. I get up at 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm usually in Kanab. I drive for an hour to the parking lot. Well, it's just the spot where you can leave your car basically. Then you hike for about 2 hours up a slick rock and over sand dunes and sage fields. The path is not marked. There's very few markers, so you either need to know the place or you need to carry GPS and follow the directions basically. And if you walk at night, you need a good flashlight so that you don't fall somewhere. You can hear coyotes especially in the morning and after after sunset. They sometimes howl very close, and you can hear there's multiple of them, and it always makes me feel uncomfortable. But everybody's telling me you should not be afraid of the coyotes. They don't do anything bad. I'm sure I've been seen by a mountain lion, but I haven't seen one. So, and there are rattlesnakes, so that's what you deal with. Yeah.
Wow. And the work itself, so when you go up at night, can you talk about how you're painting with light?
Night photography is something that I dearly love because as opposed to daylight photography, when you preconceive a shot and you know how it's supposed to look because you can see it. At night you cannot see anything basically. What you can see is basically just outlines or gray, different shades of gray, but you don't see colors, number one, and you don't really see what you shoot well. But the camera can collect light for 15-20 seconds, and then something magic happens. You point camera to something that's almost darkness, and after 20 seconds what you see on your little monitor on the camera is incredibly colorful. You see just about any color, saturated colors, and that's always a special moment. It always stops my heart for a while. I stop breathing because it's so immensely beautiful and unexpected sometimes. You cannot really preconceive those night shots so well because you cannot see it. You cannot collect light for 20 seconds. And you work with very little light, as opposed to daylight shot when all the light is coming from the sun. At night you have to work with either residual sunset glow, just that little band of light sometimes in the horizon after sunset. You can paint with light, you can emphasize whatever you want exposed. So this is like dodging and burning in the dark room, what we used to do, but now in real life. So this is pretty exciting because you are forming the image as it is happening, as you are forming it inside a camera, rather than in post-production.
And what made you think of this? Is this something well known, or was it your own
Night photography
concept?
is getting actually very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's quite a bit of information on the internet, but I have to admit that I haven't read that. I just did it in my own way, kind of figuring out things on my own. It's a lot more fun. Just like when I mentioned about building the telescope your own way, you just learn the technique better if you try it yourself. So because of my background in astronomy and my interest, it was something very natural to do. And optical instruments and the sensors are something that I understand from this perspective. So a lot of things come natural to me to do. So it's pretty exciting to work with night photography because you have only a few sources of light that you have to choose wisely, and timing is critical. And it's fairly difficult to do technically correct those shots. Sometimes I have to take multiple shots and average them out to remove the noise before you do denoising, otherwise you would lose on sharpness. Sometimes I combine the light from the moon and from the flashlight, but in a way that you can't tell. I've heard photographers telling me that my colors of darkness photograph is a composite because you can never get that light simply. It's out of question. Yet it was all formed within 15 seconds inside the camera. It's not a composite. So when somebody says that to me, it's an offense and praise at the same time.
Right. I could see that. So after you take that shot, are you able to view it there?
Yes, you can see it.
In your viewfinder?
Yes.
Okay, so
you can
now
see
you can see a little bit of the colors.
You can see it on the LCD monitor.
Mm-hmm.
In your viewfinder you see nothing.
Okay.
But you can see it on the LCD monitor.
Okay.
This past July, I took a shot that just knocked my breath out. It was incredible. Because you don't see colors, you only have a hunch that there is something there. There's some sort of light, and you may not even realize initially what kind of light it is, but you just see that there is some light in the clouds. And I took the shot, and there is this orange-red vortex in the sky because it was a thunderstorm. lit from below by the city of Page, by those sodium vapor lights, which gives it the orange color. And then the sky, then you would see the rest of the sky with many, many stars that was kind of purplish. Then I captured during the exposure also lightning above the Hopi mountain, about the Navajo mountain in the background. And then I light painted in front. So you had 4 sources of light. And the picture looks completely surreal. You look at it and you say, you would swear that this is just a composite, added colors and all of it, yet it's a single shot with 4 unique sources of light, just unique circumstances. Right. But you cannot see in any of that. All you'll see is just an outline, basically, and sometimes flashes of distant lightning. That's all you see. So you point it to the darkness, and you just say, let's see what's there, because you cannot see. So it's like your instrument. It's like a telescope or microscope. You don't see it with your eyes, but you know something is there. So you point it there, and you wait for a miracle to happen.
Did you name that image?
I have 2 names for that image.
What are they?
One is End of the World, because it looks apocalyptic. But the second one is Time to Hatch, because that stone creature in the foreground, it looks like it's just forming in front of your eyes when the circumstances are right, and the circumstances are in the sky. So it could be one, or maybe it's going to be something else. I love naming my images and coming up with stories for them.
Yeah, and you talk about that. You say that these images start to tell stories, right? Their own stories. Can you expand on that?
Well, sometimes I start with a story. Sometimes I want to convey something. For example, there are beautiful lace rocks in those places. Lace rock is like a 3-dimensional honeycomb from thin rocks that looks impossible, like how this could have been created. I wanted to tell the story of those rocks. They almost look like skeletons of rocks. If they lived, if they were alive, then this would be their skeleton. So I thought about using the sun to bring them back to life. I call that image resurrection, and it's the rising sun bursting through the opening in one of those interesting big lace rocks that is seemingly granting it life again after it had died. So sometimes I form the story in my head to help me with the composition and how to structure the shot. And sometimes the story comes afterwards. You take it because of the constraints of the light, because of the constraints of the composition, and because you feel it, but you don't know exactly. You have this inkling, you have this strong feeling that something wonderful is there, and then you come up with the story afterwards. But I do want each of my shots to convey a story, to be a storyline, basically. And it's pretty challenging because it's not something you can draw yourself. And you don't have 4 frames to convey the story. You have just a single frame to convey the story.
That's incredible. Could we talk about Elusive, your first series? Where did the name come from? And I'd love to talk about some of the highlights of that show.
Well, the name kind of comes from 2 directions. I will start with the less obvious one, and that is the life of those rocks itself is kind of elusive in its own, because they have a short lifespan. Not necessarily, they are not necessarily permanent. They break, they weather down. Sometimes people take them down. Even that happens, sadly. And we don't realize that because we think a rock is there forever, but they have elusive lives. But the second meaning of elusive is I'm trying to capture a moment that is very elusive. I want the viewer to have a feeling that they are witnessing something special. When you look at a picture, I want you to feel that this is an exceptional circumstance that is captured in the photograph, not something that you will just be able to visit the location and take the picture yourself. Something that you have to do 50 times before you get it right. The feeling of uniqueness. So that can be sometimes very elusive. I visited some locations so many times before I got the shot.
And what are some of your favorite images from that series?
From elusive?
Yeah.
I like the night shots a lot. They are always fun to do. I like the Colors of Darkness, which portrays a famous location in Arizona called The Wave in Coyote Buttes North, under the pyramid.
Sure.
That was planned for a year, including getting the hard-to-get permit, which was the biggest problem. Then you have the permit for 1 day. There are no rain checks. You cannot go some other day or the day before. You have to go on that day.
So if the weather's not cooperating.
If the weather is not cooperating, you don't have the shot.
Wow.
And I was hoping for water in the wave so that I have some sort of interesting foreground. And also because of technical demands, because I would be losing my depth of field shooting really wide to get the sky. So I needed something that would take the out of focus part of the image. So a lot of thought goes into that. Also, the moon was in a perfect position that would lit one of the walls that would be super hard to light paint, and I light painted the rest. So there was so much thought coming into that shot, so much planning, basically a year ahead to get that shot, and I came back with exactly what I wanted to, and so that was my first night shot that I was really proud of, the Colors of Darkness. So that's probably the one that I'm the most proud of. But picking a favorite shot is like picking a favorite child.
Sure.
So I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I like them all. Some have nice stories. Some have nice memories. I have memories with pictures to remind me of the moment.
Can you walk us through one?
I was there in the beginning of September this year, and I was shooting White Pocket by a monolith, and it was about an hour before sunset. I set up my tripod to do just about the only meaningful composition I could come up with that I actually liked a lot, and something that I haven't seen anywhere. It was kind of a unique composition, unique concept. And I was waiting for the weather to change and happen, basically. I had a sense that something special is going to happen, and it did. And I received a phone call. Actually, there is cell phone signal in this part of the wilderness,
Okay.
one of the few, that our daughter's college is being evacuated because of the hurricane, and we need to get her a ticket back to Binghamton. So I started going on kayak on my cell phone while I was taking the pictures, trying to find a one-way ticket for $800 from Sarasota to Binghamton to Philadelphia and take care of this problem right there. And I was doing this emergency problem solving as I was taking the shot. I basically set my camera to do 5 shots bracketing, and so that I cover the dynamic range. I don't have to check what I took picture of, and I would take the shot as the light was changing in the past 45 minutes. And great 2 shots came out of that evening, and we were able to get the ticket from Sarasota and make sure that she will be safe. So that will be always a memory. Sure. in my mind. And sometimes I play music to get into the mood, to get ideas. I need to be, like, for example, when I'm sleepy, I don't take good pictures because I don't have the mental energy. It's all about getting the ideas, and so I don't take typically the greatest pictures in the morning, even though some of the best shots I do have with sunrise. But I like sunsets a lot more, but sometimes just they don't work, so you have to go for sunrise. So music sometimes. Sometimes I hear music with a shot. The music I was playing, that was kind of getting me in the mood to execute it, yeah.
Neat. Very neat. Your new series is called Awakening.
Yes.
And again, when I look at those images, it's just, I've never seen anything like it in my life. I mean, do you feel the same after you come up with it? It's just...
Yes, that's the idea.
We need the world to see these images.
I agree.
So what about this new series? Because the old series was incredible. How could you top that? And I think you have.
That's always in the back of my mind, Can I do better than that? And I never know unless I go and spend my time. And sometimes you have to get lucky. There's a lot of randomness in this process, and sometimes you do get lucky, and sometimes you don't get lucky at all. I mean, as a rule of thumb, most of the time I come back without a shot.
I think you mentioned one of them was called Rock and Roll. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you describe that image?
Well, it was a magical, it was a magical evening. Excuse me. When I came to White Pocket, the storm was just departing, and there was a beautiful rainbow in the east. So I immediately, when you see a rainbow, you start running through your mind. What's facing this direction? What can I put into the foreground that would work? So I came up with something that made a lot of sense. And then the light started changing. The weather was changing. The sun was setting. And I could shoot continuously for about 45 minutes with some of the best light I've ever seen in my entire life. And from that night itself, I got many fantastic shots. And one of them is Rock and Roll that you mentioned, when the sky was pretty much covered with interesting, dramatic, smooth clouds with beautiful gradients and little like torn portions of dark clouds mixed with these. And it just, for a brief moment, you just got a breath of that sunset rich red light that just caressed the rocks and gave beautiful color, yellow color, to those low-lying clouds. And this is this is when I press the shutter button, and it's one of those that I call perfect shots that you don't have to do much to. You basically develop them in Lightroom. You do small adjustments and that's it. You don't have to do any bracketing. You don't have to do anything. It's perfectly fitting within the dynamic range of the camera. No HDR, no magic, just that. And I love those images the most because they're just right.
And so, what are some of the other names from that time period where you took those shots?
Don't have everything named yet,
okay.
But I have Extraterrestrial. There is Awakening, as you already know. There's Rock and Roll.
Wasn't there one like Crash Landing or something?
Oh, there's a Crash Landing, yes.
Yeah.
That's not from that night, that's from a
Okay.
different day. Yeah, there's Crash Landing with a beautiful lace rock with the Coyote Buttes peaks in the background,
Yeah.
lit by the rising sun. You have to go for sunrise if you want to shoot those lace rock. There's no other way to do that. So I don't have it all in my head with the names,
sure.
yeah.
Well, I can't wait for this next show to come out. It's going to be incredible. What is next for you? Do you have your next trip planned?
Yes, I have a conference in San Francisco at the end of January, so I'll probably spend about 3 days in Utah and Arizona in the beginning of February.
Okay.
February is a funny month. It can be really interesting. The last time I was there, the region just got a foot of snow,
Wow.
and that foot of snow just melted. And that's a lot worse than if you just get a lot of rain, because rain has a tendency to wash off into those washes and go away. But imagine a foot of snow that just melts into the ground. It doesn't really flow away. So what happens is that all the access roads were so muddy that I've never seen so much mud in my entire life. The car I had, you couldn't see the color.
Wow.
I had to clean the headlights to have some light on the way back because there was no light coming out of the headlights. It was encrusted with mud.
Interesting.
Getting there is half the fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's right. And what's your mission with this? What are you trying to do?
Well, as I said, I try to tell stories. I want to keep telling the stories because there are so many untold stories to be told.
Well, Jessica, this has been incredible. I'm just fascinated with all of your work. It's incredible. I started by saying that it sounds like you're a problem solver. And are there any other problems that you want to solve? Are you thinking about anything new?
New in what? In my
Well,
work or my photography?
Yeah, or even outside. Just is there anything else to come that you want to solve?
There's this emerging direction in science now. It's called deep learning or artificial neural networks with deep structure that are revolutionizing the way we do signal processing. It's also revolutionizing the way we do steganalysis. It's a new tool. It's very exciting. It's extremely smart. It's a black box. We don't really know how this really works, but we know that it works the best. My student recently came up with a neural network design that just smashed all the records basically in steganalysis. I'm very proud, and he should be proud of his work that he did. So I'm very excited about this new direction at work and see where this actually leads. In some way, it's similar to the development with the cube. Like in 1982, if somebody told me it's possible to solve the cube in 5 seconds, I would not believe. And if somebody told me 3 years ago that we can actually steganalize as accurately as we do now, I would not believe them either. And it's fascinating to see how even your wildest dreams are just not wild enough.
That we can keep going further and further, right?
And it's fascinating.
Incredible. Well, before we let you go, I have one last question, and that is, what do you want your legacy to be? Because you're leaving a lot of good things behind.
Yeah, I think history will take its own path, independent of what we want. It has always been this way, for the better and for the worse. So I will leave it to the history, how I will be remembered. It could be the cube, I don't know. I'm hoping that there will be more than the cube.
I think it will be. Well, thanks so much. This has been wonderful. And we will continue to follow your work. We will post it. And how can people reach you? What is your website?
It's very simple. It's jessicafridrich.com, no spaces, all lowercase. So if you know how to spell the name, you just put jessicafridrich.com and you will see my photography website. And you can send an email from there. Another possibility is to just Google my name, and the first link is my professional website with my email. So the best way is by email.
Great. And we'll be sure to post the links as well, and a lot of your artwork too.
Sure.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Raja.
Thank you.